Cynthia, why don't you go ahead? Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Mansfield Downtown Partnership Board of Directors to order. Cynthia, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, so I'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of the October 7th, 2021 meeting, which is in your board packet. I'll give you a quick minute to find those, and then I'm happy to take a motion to approve.
Kyle, I'll move to approve.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, Pravas. Thank you, Tony and Pravas. Any comment? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Great. So minutes are passed. Okay, the next item on our agenda, we're lucky to have Linda Painter, the Director of Planning and Development for the Town of Mansfield, joining us to talk through our next agenda item. And I thought it appropriate, especially since myself and maybe some others have not met Linda, to quickly go around if everybody could introduce themselves. So Linda, my name is Kyle Muncie. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the University of Connecticut, and I'm in my first year as the President of the Board of Directors, and it's great to have you here. I'll hand it over to Kara.
Linda and I know each other very well.
Perfect. Anyone else that needs to introduce themselves to Linda, why don't we say it that way?
Hi, Linda. Frank Gifford, AVP at the Yukon Foundation. Been in town, live in Mansfield. Our family's been here for about 28 years. Been on the board, I think, for 4.
Hi, Linda. I'm Pravas. I am the student representative on the board. I'm a lifelong Mansfield resident so far, and current Yukon student, which is where I am right now, a little away from the cold wind, but it's nice to meet you virtually.
Nice to meet you too.
Anyone else?
Hi, Linda. I'm Emily Wicks. I'm the Manager of Operations and Collections at the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry in downtown Stores. I've been on the board for, I guess, a little over a year now.
All right.
So Linda, we'll turn it over to you. Everybody received all the information in our board packet. If there's any necessity, you feel at any point to share anything, Cynthia can facilitate that, or one of us could certainly share it as well. But the floor is all yours.
All right, great.
I'm sorry, Linda. I'm sorry, Linda and Kyle, can I just jump in? Somebody joined on the phone,
Oh, okay.
I think. Is there someone there on the phone?
It appears they may be on mute.
Yeah, it's an 865 area code, it looks like.
Okay, not sure. Sometimes Mario comes in on the phone. So, okay, well, we'll go ahead, Linda, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We all go through this. This is not the first time. It will not be the last time, as long as we're doing virtual meetings. So thank you, everybody, for having me. It's very nice to meet you all. I think it has been several years since I have met with the partnership board. Probably since the last time we had a public hearing on design of buildings at Storage Center and the park there. So since that was completed, this board does not see a lot of me, but I'm happy to be here. As noted on the agenda and in your packet, the reason I'm here today is to talk to you about the potential sales and cultivation of cannabis in Mansfield. So with the state's action this summer to legalize cannabis establishments and the recreational and sale of recreational or cannabis for recreational use, we have a moratorium in town until March of 2022. The Planning and Zoning Commission put that into place, quite frankly, before the legislation was adopted. We saw the writing on the wall, and they wanted to make sure that they had time to really contemplate and think about how they wanted to regulate these establishments. And so we are in that process right now. You have been provided with a copy of the framework that the commission has developed along with a timeline. So right now we are in the technically October 2021 line, even though it's November 4th, which is to get input on the approach from various committees. And I actually, looking at this board, know a few of you have actually heard this presentation before or multiple times at the Economic Development Commission and the University and Town Relations Committee. But what I wanted to focus on with the partnership were basically regulations that focus on downtown. So, that's really your area of focus. And the commission is contemplating allowing certain types of facilities in the store center special design district, as well as the planned business 2. Which for those of you who aren't familiar, the planned business 2 applies to, I want to say, 3 or 4 properties at this point. There are basically remnants from the district that existed prior to the establishment of the special design district for downtown. So University Plaza, Stores Commons, and then is it still the Roberge building, Cynthia, on Dog Lane? So those properties are all zoned planned business 2, as is the 4-story building that used to house Husky Pizza. I believe Select Physical Therapy is in it, in the Dog Lane parking lot down. Those that, believe it or not, that's considered a separate district and is not part of the downtown. So in terms of what the commission is considering, they're really looking at different types of sales. And so the first type of facility that we're considering is a dispensary. So dispensaries are only for medical marijuana sales. We currently have one dispensary in Mansfield. It is Nature's Medicine. I'm not sure if the name changed with the ownership change, but it's on Storrs Road up in the Four Corners.
Linda, is it still open? I understand it closed. And they moved the business to Willimantic, which would mean we don't have one in Mansfield anymore.
That I'm not aware of. I don't know if Cynthia has an update on that.
So I think that there is, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, there is one in Willimantic that's the same group that bought out Nature's Medicines, and I'm forgetting the name of them for.
Right, isn't it like a 3-letter acronym or something?
I think something like that, Ryan. Yeah, I keep
Yeah.
wanting to say Kettle, but that's not right. But I don't know that it's closed. But I can
On the
find out.
website, it says Fine Federal
Yes, thank
Dispensary.
you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, FFD or something.
Yeah, so that dispensary was licensed and permitted because essentially when the state adopted the dispensary requirements, we looked at our regulations and determined that those were really office uses, because it's not something where anyone can walk in off the street. It's by appointment only. So they actually did not need, other than a sign permit, anything, and some building permits for modifications, anything from us to go into that building. So we are proposing that dispensaries would be allowed by right in existing buildings in the planned business 2 and in the downtown. If you wanted to do new construction, it would be something, again, that would be site plan approval. And so this would be a change. We would actually list this in the uses separate from office. One thing as I think about this, and we're going to have to understand the state restrictions a little bit better, is if you're familiar with the Nature's Medicines building, there are bars on windows, there are very thick doors, there's a lot of security that comes with this, and I don't know if that's changed with the new regulations. I've heard from a member of my staff who has seen stores and out in California. She's like, oh, they're adorable, they're very cute. And I'm like, we'll see if we can accomplish that with the state here. So that, again, really dispensaries, it is, you have to have a prescription from a doctor in order to purchase anything from a dispensary. In terms of the retailers, just to be clear, by statute, a special permit is required for a retailer. So a retailer basically does not require a prescription. So you can sell cannabis and cannabis products, no no prescription needed. The main issues that we're looking at with regard to retailers is you are actually only allowed to have one retailer per 25,000 population. Our population based on the 2020 census is around 25,008 or 900 roughly. So we would qualify for one retailer. Once we have one, that is it until 2023 or 2024, when the Commissioner of Consumer Protection would establish new criteria in terms of what your population would need to be per establishment. So before talking about putting a retailer in downtown, the commission really wanted to get feedback from you as the downtown partnership on whether or not this is something that you would be open to seeing in the downtown area. And then some of the criteria the commission is considering is whether or not we should have separation distances from schools. By statute, we are allowed to impose separation distances from any types of uses that you can currently require separation distances for alcohol sales. So the two that the commission kind of honed in on were potentially high schools and childcare. And I will tell you that members had different opinions. Some were more concerned about the high school, some were more concerned about the childcare, and younger children. So whether or not that's something you think we should consider. And they also want us to look at day and hour restrictions based on what is currently established for alcohol sales in the state. But so those are the primary criteria. The next type of use on the list, and it's a similar question, quite frankly, is what the state is calling a hybrid retailer. So this is someone who is licensed both for medical marijuana and for recreational use. And there is no limit on the number of hybrid retailers you can have in a community, other than, quite frankly, getting the licenses from the state. And I'm not sure how hard those will be to obtain. And then the other types of businesses that we're contemplating potentially downtown, and I will say this is really going to be based on scale, is food and beverage manufacturers, product manufacturers, and product packagers. And so this is something where I think the commission would likely be looking at limiting the size of a facility. So if you really kind of have a small business, this might not be a bad location. If you want 50,000 square feet, downtown's not the place to go. So those are the types of businesses, and essentially those basically you're engaged in acquiring cannabis and creating either a food or a beverage or manufacturing products that use cannabis. So, or packaging and labeling products with cannabis. So those are the other uses that we're thinking about for downtown. And again, I think it depends on scale. I think it depends on, exterior modifications and whether or not that really fits in with the district itself. So the cultivation uses that we have in here, I was not planning on going into too much detail right now. Cultivation, quite frankly, for the commission is on the we'll think about it. They're not necessarily sure. I think the chair has multiple times said, yeah, we're not really sure that we want to do this. If they consider cultivation in Mansfield, they are really want to visit an existing cultivation facility for medical marijuana to understand the impacts, particularly odor, that may come with those facilities. So right now they're focusing more on opportunities related to sale than they are cultivation. And once we get through kind of this initial consultation process, we will be having a joint meeting with the council and the Planning and Zoning Commission to talk through this framework and the concepts, and hopefully get everyone on the same page, and then draft regulations, which will be put out again for review and comment, both for the public as well as advisory committees. So that's my presentation. Any thoughts? And I will tell you, the common response has been, this seems to be a little bit too open-ended, and folks have had a hard time wrapping their brains around this, and really want and maybe looking for us to actually just put regulations forward. But again, the main thing we're looking for is this a non-starter? Do you think that any type of cannabis sales in downtown is something that we should just absolutely take off the table, or are you open to it?
Go ahead, Steve.
Linda, thank you. This is the second time I've seen this one, and I learned something both times, so it was great. And my views on this have kind of been evolving. But the one thing I don't think you brought up this time that you brought up at the EDC was that transporter piece of things. So we can't prohibit somebody from transporting or delivering marijuana to our town. So if our residents want it, they could have it delivered from a adjacent town, right?
Correct. Yeah, so the state law specifically says that we can't prohibit someone from acquiring this. And then the other piece of the regulations, which is less planning and zoning and probably more town council, will be use of cannabis in establishments. So, and I believe the statutes also limit what we can do there, that it's more smoking than it is food products. In other words, I'm not sure that we can limit somebody from selling you a brownie for consumption on premises, but we can, similar to how we regulate smoking, we can do that particularly in terms of public and municipal spaces. So that's something that the council will need to look at. Just so you all know, the statute that created this is over 300 pages long. So, we quite frankly, at a staff level, we've relied on some of the white papers produced by the Southeastern Council, Connecticut Council of Governments, as well as I think it was the town of Southbury did a lovely 3 or 4 page brochure for their residents and to help kind of nail down what we're focusing in on. Obviously that 300 pages has a lot of stuff that relates specifically to licenses and what you need to do to grow or sell. And so our focus really has been on, is this something that the town wants to consider allowing? There are some financial benefits for the town in that we are allowed to, or we are basically entitled, I would say, to 3% of the gross receipts of cannabis establishments, hybrid cannabis establishments, or hybrid cannabis retailers, hybrid retailers, and micro cultivators. So that is the kind of the financial incentive for the town to allow these businesses. And someone has asked me what that might be. I have no idea because I don't know what the gross receipts of these businesses are. So, but we do get 3%. That is something that was written into the statute.
Sean, Cynthia did say Sean had something he wanted to add or no? I know he's joined us on the phone, so I think she's trying to unmute him.
There
you are.
Hey, folks. I am,
Hi, Sean.
can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm in the car and I've learned that there are special commands when doing Zoom by phone that involve the star key. So sorry to be the mysterious number in the meeting tonight. Linda, thanks for your presentation. It's very informative. I was wondering what the town was doing after this popped up in another town on the news this morning. What should we be expecting any new activities outdoors in Storrs Center and maybe even thinking forward to next year's festival? Is there anything that we should be thinking about as a board? To have certain policies in place, or are there laws about use outside dispensaries that we should be considering?
So that's where I think this is going to be under the control of the town council in terms of regulating use of cannabis in lighted cigarette, pipe, or similar form on land that's under the control of the municipality. So for the town square, public streets, the festival, the town has the ability to regulate that. And the suggestion I've seen from the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments is that the ordinances we have may already cover it, but it's something that should be reviewed. And they said basically, particularly if we wanted to prohibit the smoking of cannabis on municipal property. So that's something that would be specifically under the council's jurisdiction. And I won't speak for the council, but I'm sure the mayor can address, but I would assume there may be, some interest in learning from the partnership if you had any feelings as you typically manage the square for us.
Yeah, they follow up. I start to think about the proximity of E.O. Smith, maybe even the proximity of our campus and establishment, particularly outdoors.
I think one of the questions, Sean, and this is honestly, it's going to be, I have not gone through the statutes. I'm not sure what the provisions are for state property. So this, everything I've looked at has been specific to municipalities. I'm not sure what the statute has in terms of what state agencies can do on state property. So I would think maybe someone from UConn will be exploring that to understand what you can do on your property.
Yeah, actually, you just had, I'm writing all these notes because clearly for us, the implications are quite different. So I'll have to do some looking into this. And actually, I wrote a note, even though our framework meetings are supposed to be about a different subject, this might be something to consider at our next framework meeting. Because it really has implications for all of us.
Now, and again, that was, I think when we started this process with the moratorium this summer, the commission's approach was, yes, let's give ourselves some time to consider this issue. And they really wanted to be able to get input from other stakeholders and committees, and obviously, with a large college population, understanding the university, may have some concerns here. I can tell you that we have the files from when alcohol sales were legalized in Mansfield back in the 1950s. And I have read the letters from the university, which basically said, we'd really like this like 5 miles away from us if you possibly can. We didn't end up with that separation distance, but I believe it was at least a mile, if not more. And so obviously, those are things to consider. But because this expires in March in terms of the moratorium, we did want to get started because our process, once we draft regulations, can take us some time in terms of the advertising and the public hearing process. And what we didn't want to do at a staff level or at the commission level was start drafting regulations, which can be time consuming, only to find out that people think we should just not allow this at all. Because quite frankly, writing a prohibition is fairly simple. Writing the regulations when you want to allow it takes a little bit more work and effort. The one thing I did not mention, and so this is kind of one thing that can trump anything that the commission or the council do regarding this, is that the legislation does allow voters to force a referendum on whether retail sales will be allowed in a town. And so that requires at least 10% of registered voters to petition for that referendum. So, they've said, we're leaving this in the hands of the municipalities, but the voters, your residents can come in and say, this is what we want, and take over if they don't like what we're doing.
And I guess a question, since P&Z is its own entity, is there a leaning emerging in terms of what they desire, or they truly are taking feedback from?
No, they've put together, so this is a framework and an approach that they've put together, and I would say right now, their thought is looking at, yes, let's allow sales in certain locations under certain conditions. And there are districts other than downtown that they're considering. I will say it's primarily focused on what we would consider our major commercial centers. So Four Corners and the Southern Gateway down by Eastbrook Mall, as well as potentially Perkins Corner, which is Route 32 Stafford Road and Route 31 Higgins Highway area. The cultivation, as I mentioned, that's where they're really, I would say, less sure about, and because of the potential impacts with odor. But again, one of the reasons that we kind of laid this process out was they wanted to get feedback from folks before they drafted regulations. They also want to have a joint meeting with the council, recognizing that while they technically, are the land use authority in town, this is an issue that for a lot of folks goes beyond land use, and they wanted to meet with the council and talk about this together before they move forward on a certain path. Because that again, this is a broader issue in terms of what we're regulating than just than a simple land use issue, how we would treat most items.
One of the things I've been thinking is sort of, especially relative to the downtown space, is the appetite of the property owners to actually have to bring in a tenant in this space. Because I think, and Cynthia, correct me if I'm wrong, but in our various conversations with property owners, one of them was quite outspoken that this is not even a consideration in their portfolio. So very.
Do you mean, Kyle, that they don't want it under any circumstances, or it's irrelevant?
What? No. They do not. They would not be supportive. They would not bring it in. If it was permitted, they wouldn't bring it in because they don't want to be in that. They don't want to be in that business. I don't know. So I don't know if that's, again, I think and the only reason I mention it is because obviously those folks are in the business of, of hopefully creating vibrant retail shopping areas that bring in a good mix of, clientele. And clearly this particular property owner was quite comfortable that that would not be a clientele that they would be looking to bring to their space. Now, again, that's just the opinion of one, and perhaps an offer of a certain lease payment would change their mind, or support of the town council and of UConn and of various entities, but again, I think it's just something, as I was listening to you present, and listening to the back and forth, obviously, in my mind, I see this appearing, especially a retail presence of it appearing perhaps a little more seamlessly in some of the other locations you referenced, like a Four Corners or Four Corners. So anyway.
And that was why, if you looked at the table, under these, we actually didn't list Plan Business 2 and Storage Center in the proposed locations. We listed under restrictions that they wanted input before they even kind of moved in that direction. And again, I do think some of the concerns for downtown were the childcare center that exists, as well as the school, and that this may not be a great location to put this type of use. And so I think that's where they really, again, we're looking for input. The exception was the dispensary, and so that was something that, if you wanted to do a dispensary facility, if you were licensed for a dispensary, that was something they said they're like, yeah, we would propose that in downtown. Again, that's a prescription based, it's appointment based. Unless the state is making significant changes, from the tour that the mayor and I took, probably well before the pandemic. We did it, and Cynthia, we did a tour of the existing dispensary, and I was frankly stunned by the level of security. There is not a level of security in that facility. There is not a door that is not locked at all times. Everything requires you to be buzzed through. Every conference room, every door leading somewhere requires some type of access. It's locked at all times. It's really, that was something we're like, well, if you wanted to do that, I think, again, the one challenge in downtown would be the lack of windows. And I'm not sure a facility would meet our requirement for, if they came in and said, we need to block in the windows or put bars on everything, that may not fly. So.
Yeah, and I guess the only other point that I'd make relative to some of the comments you've made about proximity to school, or even, the concern that a UConn might have in proximity to campus, I think you know, and your comment about the 1950s is pretty funny. And 5 miles in 1950 might as well have been 100, because no one had a car. Certainly the students didn't have a car. You know, I almost look at it in some respect, and this is just my opinion, that the closer, if they're going to find it anyway, then I would almost prefer they walk to it than anyone get in a car and have to drive to it. So that's, but again, I think that's neither here nor there. I think relative to ultimately the, you know, I think it's a function of, I guess the question I'd have for, and this might be more for the mayor, if the statute says that based on the size of Mansfield, that only one retailer would be permitted, is it within the purview of the town to do an RFP saying who wants to be the one retailer and who wants to be the one property owner? Because I don't know if necessarily the town wants to say, well, the first one to pull the trigger gets it, because then maybe it's not in the best interest of the town. So I'm just wondering if the town has had that type of conversation at all about, okay, you know what, if we are going to do this, we're going to do it, and it's going to be on the town's terms, in terms of who that particular retailer is going to be and where that particular retailer is going to be. And we're going to work with our various partners to make that happen.
Well, I would leave that question to Linda and Ryan, because I'm not sure we have the legal authority to do that for a private business. We certainly would have the authority to do it for a public business. And the downtown partnership was able to search for a developer. I think that was probably a very different situation.
Yeah,
what I was going to say earlier is that there are people on, I think there's a very definite division by age, although some of our older folks were old hippies and druggies back in the past too, so they may be, there's a split even among our 65 and up community. It always tickles me to discover that we've got people who were LSD fans back in the day. And we do. But anyway, I think that the younger generation wants one, absolutely, and they want it as close to campus as possible, and is easily accessible for the public, because we have plenty of people in the community who are going to want to, instead of getting drunk, have a gummy at night or something. So I think that the fear that was expressed by so many people during the 50s is probably not going to be, you're not going to really find that here now.
And I think,
Ryan, what is your, or Linda, what are your senses about the ability to choose who comes?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would actually echo what you were saying, that I'd want to, I guess, think about it maybe a little more, but since we're talking about private business and where a private enterprise sets itself up, you know, to your point, I don't know, absent it being located on town property in a town-owned building and that sort of thing, I don't really know that there's, you know, a sort of, as much as Kyle, I understand what you're saying about, you know, you'd have more control over it and it would be less, you know, left to chance, so to speak. But unless Linda's thinking of something I'm not really sure that I see our ability to control it in that sort of prescriptive a way.
I'd like to reach out to the town attorney, because we did make Masonic Hair our preferred senior housing vendor of choice 15 whatever years ago, which I think was a total joke. But nevertheless, that was done. And we've been waiting for Godot on that one for 15 years. But I love the idea that Kyle had of being able to pick the person who's going to run this. My first pass on this whole thing when Linda presented it to EDC was, I'd rather not have it in my backyard. But I've talked to a bunch of people to try to get different opinions other than mine. And a lot of people I've spoken with have said, you know, if it's going to be here, whether we want it or not, like, you know, that they can order delivery and have it delivered. Do you want other towns to get all the benefit, and we still have people smoking pot or eating gummies or whatever in our town, but we're not getting a benefit out of it, no tax dollars, and we can't control it? Or do you want to have it here where we can control it and who is, who's running the operation and where it is? And so now that I'm kind of coming around on maybe it's something that I want to consider for our town, I would love to look into whether or not we can do the RFP and have a preferred vendor, because I think that really gives us that control over who's running the show as opposed to whoever the first guy through the door is.
Sean, it looks like you have your hand up.
If Sean's not actually has his hand up, I think Linda was going to say something.
Hey, sorry, folks.
Oh, Sean.
I can't keep track of the keys now. Just a quick question for, excuse me, or suggestion to Linda. When the time comes for, or to Kara actually, when the time comes, I wonder what UMass had done with the proximity of some of the dispensaries close to them. So it's the only example close to us I can think of that where a town gown situation might apply.
Good suggestion.
I think we can look into that. And in response, I agree with Steve. This is something that we would have to take to the town attorney. My instinct kind of lies with Ryan that it's private business. And I think the other thing that we'd have to go back and look at the statutes a little bit is we've already received one letter from a resident who was like, oh yes, you absolutely should pursue this. And you should look at Massachusetts because these communities got all of these things. And the legislature specifically has said that we cannot do community agreements. So communities in Massachusetts were able to basically do agreements with these businesses that says, oh, we're going to get X, Y, and Z. And the legislature said, no, we're not allowing you to do that. You can have 3% of gross receipts. And I think it's for 30 days after a grand opening, we can recoup up to $50,000 in public safety service costs associated with an opening. But that was, so I think the RFP might be maybe seen as we're trying to kind of move in that community agreement direction. But I think what the town can do is be very, if we're concerned about this in terms of the number, so we can have one retailer by population. They have not limited the number of the hybrid, which is that medical recreational combination. And so, one way to approach this would be to say, we're going to be very judicious in what district we allow you to locate in. So right now, as we look at this, as I said, we were looking at the Four Corners, the Eastbrook Mall area. I will say we also, and I missed one, which was King Hill Road. So that's something where I think UConn would have a lot of interest in whether or not, that's one of our other major commercial districts. It really is the edge of campus. I'm sure the university has some definite thoughts about whether or not we should be allowing retailers or hybrid retailers in that location. It's quite frankly, a very small district. So, there's not, I think maybe 5 to 7 acres total there, but that's one to look at. And then again, the Perkins Corner. So one way to do this in terms of limitation, if the town is saying, you know what, we'd be good with one, but we really don't want to see, all of these facilities everywhere, might be to say, let's figure out what district we want to put it in. And that we pick one zoning district for these types of uses so that you're not looking at a potential, everywhere. So that's one potential approach.
One of the interesting things that keeps coming to the back of my mind that nobody's discussed, and I don't know whether it's as relevant as I think it is. UConn has just made this agreement with WRTD that WRTD will run both UConn buses and community buses, so they can pick up students on campus and take them anywhere off campus that the bus lines decide to run. So there isn't that split between, if you leave campus, you have to walk or drive. It will now be a lot easier to get transportation anywhere in town. So I still think the closer to the campus, the better, because that's our population center. I don't think it makes a great deal of sense to put this out Route 89 on the Ashford border. You know, you want to put this where the people are, and the population center is on campus. And, you know.
So I think the other piece of this that I just want to include is that the commission's, you know, kind of one hard and fast was they want to prohibit this as a home occupation. So anything that is related to cannabis, sales, cultivation, production, manufacturing, you know, there no cottage industries in your house with cannabis was kind of their feeling on this. You know, obviously you might be a transporter, meaning you are licensed to transport this. So that's, you know, I don't know that that's something we can necessarily limit. But they were concerned about kind of the proliferation of this through neighborhoods. So.
As if it isn't already there.
Well, and I will say, I do remember seeing in the statute, I believe everyone in the state can grow up to 6 plants for personal use. So, you know, that's as long as you're not selling it or you have your personal use provisions.
Steve?
I don't know if this is a question for Kyle or maybe for Kara, but what's the university's take on this? Have you guys met at all about this, and where do you land?
I'm literally emailing as we speak.
Okay.
No, we have not, but we certainly need to. It's just a matter of what group and how to communicate the outcomes of that and to whom. So I'll get back on that.
All right.
Anyone else?
I see Sean's hand up. I don't know if it's still up or that was from before. I don't know if everybody can see that or just me, but
I think that's left over from.
It hasn't gone away, Cynthia. I can see
Okay.
it, and it didn't go down after he talked, but maybe he has another question.
I don't think he does. So Linda, thank you very much, especially for taking time at the end of a busy day to present. And before we let you go, so is there anything? Are there any next steps or anything else that you would need from this board before we let you go? And
I think, you know, I have kind of some questions. I get the sense that our next framework meeting is probably going to have this on the agenda for a discussion with the university. The next step really for us is going to be to schedule a joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council. And this was something we strategically scheduled for after yesterday's election. And because we knew we were going to have potentially new members on both bodies. I think Planning and Zoning is the only one right now with new members, but we didn't want to start a discussion with one group and then have that change post-election and have folks going, what are you thinking? So probably in the next few weeks, we'll look to have a special meeting. And then based on the discussion and the guidance we get from those two bodies, we'll start working with the town attorney and the commission to actually draft regulations. But, you know, the feedback that I'm getting that I would say is we haven't heard anyone come out and say, prohibit this, just don't allow it. We have not gotten that feedback. So I think what I'm hearing from today's meeting was kind of more of can we be more judicious in terms of the number, the location, we'll ask the town attorney about that possibility of, could we solicit an RFP? Steve's example of Masonic Hair from several years ago, I remember starting here after that process. And I think I asked him, like, so what does this designation get? And the answer was absolutely nothing. Other than they were the preferred provider. If any other assisted living facility had come into town, there's nothing we could have done to stop them. Like it would have gone through the regular review process. So there was I don't really understand what the benefit was other than, Masonic Care having this designation, which they've never acted on, other than buying property. They've never actually moved forward with development there. So
Linda,
you know.
I think it was as much an attempt to recruit a developer as it was to provide a kind of benefit. And of course, you see the results. And of course, no other developer has expressed any
Yeah.
interest in this community either, which is even more disappointing.
So, well, I know I just on that front, I know that Cynthia had a discussion with another assisted living provider, but it was during the pandemic. And the problem was, I think they were interested in having us come and tour one of their facilities, but pandemic wise, we just couldn't do it. So I will say I'm actually familiar with them because I have a family member who resides in one of their facilities out in Torrington. So, there may be some opportunities with some other assisted living folks on the horizon, but we, need a little bit more freedom of movement in those facilities to kind of understand what they are. But as I said, based on what I'm hearing today, I think I'll be reporting this, and and obviously, Mayor, you'll hopefully be in that joint meeting to talk about kind of the discussions you've been part of with the EDC and Town Gown. I think the only one you weren't at was agriculture. So other than that, you've been in every presentation I've done on this in the last month. So
I thought it looked familiar.
When you say agriculture, you mean our College of Agriculture or a different agriculture?
No, we actually did. I went to the town's agriculture committee. So it's an advisory committee to the town council. Frankly, their response was, we're not sure why you're talking to us because the legislation specifically excludes cultivation of cannabis from the definition of agriculture. So they went, and I'm like, well, it's not agriculture, but it is still cultivation and growing of plants for commercial purposes. So, again, I think they're struggling because this is not, they typically deal with field crops, and this, without diving deeper into the legislation, having looked at the production facilities that are in the state for medical marijuana, those are all in enclosed structures with security. It's not something where it's being grown out in fields. So that's something that, again, I think they felt like they were a little bit at sea with that, given their area of expertise. But again, our goal on this was just to really start consultations with various committees we thought might be interested and have some input.
Great. Okay,
So.
well, thank you very much again, Linda. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. And depending on where we end up, I may be coming back to you. I'll work with Cynthia, if we have some proposed regulations that we want to get your input on as we move forward in the process. So our plan right now, we're targeting February of 2022 for public hearings. And that was to give us a little cushion before the end of our moratorium. And I think it's March 21st or 22nd. And also knowing that given this topic, if we did this over winter break, we might get some pushback from folks in terms of having public hearings on something of this magnitude during that time. So.
And Linda, the more I think about it, this probably wouldn't be in our framework because there's a much broader group that we likely need to engage with.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
And if you need me for anything, Kara, you know how to find me, and I'm happy to come and talk about what I know. I will tell you, there are probably people out there who, again, it's 300 pages. I can only tackle, I kind of did word searches for things that apply to zoning in towns, but again, happy to meet with anybody to talk about kind of the approach we're taking and getting feedback from the university on that.
Great. Thanks again, Linda.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye now. All right. All right, back to the agenda. Next item is the Executive Director Report. Cynthia, turn over to you.
Great, thanks, Kyle. So I think thanks to Kara, I've set this up now so you all don't have to put your password in when you join our meeting. So I apologize for that little glitch. I think I've got to figure it out with the settings and everything. So just an update, Kyle and I think we've talked about at the board meetings in the past that we've continued to have, on again, off again conversations with the property owners most recently and probably most consistently with the Hart Realty team. And we've actually set up some, or we're in the midst of setting up some regular meetings every 3 weeks or so. There's nothing definitive to report, and they've asked us, to speak with them, to speak in confidence. So, but certainly Kyle and I could talk to some folks offline, but again, nothing definitive. But I think it's good relationship building. They have a new person, as some of you know, they've had a lot of different people involved, but Jeff Pandolfo is a new person, and so he's getting more involved. We did give them a preview that we, a couple of board members, probably Ryan, Kyle, and Sean, along with Larissa and Nora from Street Sense, will be looking to meet with them to, buy into the strategic plan, talk to them about some of our strategies. So that's encouraging. So we just let them know that we'd probably be looking to meet with them in late December or early January. And the same thing with the Oak Tree Capital Group. And again, that's the group that owns property on and Royce Circle and a little bit on Stores Road. So speaking of Larissa and Noor, we did have a meeting with them as follow-up to the board meeting. Sean had a hard time getting in, but we had Kyle and Ryan there, and we did agree to do the contract amendment to add some services in terms of meeting with the property owners with the board members. And so I conveyed that to Larissa yesterday and waiting for that contract amendment. So that's an additional $3,000. Larissa and Noor right now are planning to come to the board meeting on December 2nd. And we'll talk a little bit about that because that's related to holiday social in terms of where that might be. So they'll be moving along. We did receive just 5 responses back from the survey. You'll recall after the public presentation, we kept open a survey for a couple of weeks, I think. Most of the responses were fairly similar to what we had already heard, but we did give that to, Kathleen compiled that and gave that to Larissa and Noor. And so they're sort of full speed ahead now to start working on the second piece, which is to present the board with some strategies to accomplish some of the issues that have come up during the assessment phase. Is there anything on that before I move into events? Any questions? Prabhas?
Very quickly, and it may be too early to discuss this, but in terms of property owner buy-in, is it a buy-in to the general vision of the strategic plan, or is there a way to get buy-in on like very clear next steps so that when we discuss it with them in the future, it's not the conversation of you're bought into our strategic plan or our strategic vision, but rather you bought in and agreed to help us execute these 4 or 5 concrete steps. So I know that Street Sense will give us some recommendations, but I'm curious if those types of recommendations, like very solid, very straightforward recommendations exist, so that when we say we need buy-in from the property managers, property owners, they're buying into some very clear-cut steps and not just the vision of the downtown moving forward.
I mean, I can, defer to Kyle or Sean or Ryan, but I guess my sense is yes. And I know that was one of the concerns I think you, Prabhas, and Kyle and others brought up at the last board meeting. So one of the things was the merchandising retail strategy. That was one potential piece, financial commitment. I will say that that the Hart team is interested in continuing to increase the activity and infrastructure needs on Betsy Patterson Square, and also looking to put dollars toward that. So that was very encouraging. Our response to them was that, we want other board members, especially Sean, involved in that discussion with his, landscape architecture background and some of the work that we've done. It's just not throwing out some tables and chairs and, calling it good. And again, I'll turn over to Kyle or others if they want to add on.
I mean, Prabhas, you make a good point. That's the necessity for a deliverable from Street Sense is it needs to be concrete, and I think that's the meetings that we continue to have with the property owners on a regular basis is all sort of a part of that process. So no, I think the hope is that the strategic plan will reinforce the relationship building that we've been doing. And to this point, certainly I think one of the bigger challenges beyond the pandemic has been, to Cynthia's point, the changing faces that we have continued to have within those property owner groups. And so, it's as much as we have tried to insist that we hear things before we see or hear things through the grapevine, we're constantly, Kathleen and Denise are seeing things out the window before we're hearing them from property owners. And so it's continues to be frustrating, but all we can do is continue to engage and then, and then expect that somewhere out of this strategic plan, we would ask for them to be more of an active stakeholder.
Yeah, that all sounds good. Just, a reoccurring idea, just to make sure that what they're buying into is very clear to not just us, but to them, so that should something not go well, we've had their verbal commit, or we have a commitment to a specific thing that can't be avoided, or, oh, I didn't know that was a part of the strategic plan. But just food for thought for later down the road.
Absolutely. Yep. Anything else, Cynthia? Or
Yeah, I was not at Halloween, but I know Prabhas and Emily were there, troopers that they are. So maybe I think your numbers were a little bit different, but I'm thinking what I heard is 125, 150 kids or so. Is that right? Or
I don't know. We had 300.
300. I'm sorry.
Oh.
You said 300, and Prabhas, I think, stopped by the table and had less. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, we had.
Go ahead, Prabhas.
Oh, sorry. We had 125, but we did not have the amazing skills that Emily's table had with the Frankenstein puppet and everything. It was just me, so I don't know how big of a draw I was for families, but I think our number was definitely low just because we were kind of situated in just under the tent. We didn't have anything kind of like pulling people in, but and I definitely saw groups and families kind of walk past us that we obviously didn't count because they didn't come to a table. But from my perspective, it was a great event. It was, even though it was raining and it was pouring at some points, we had a pretty good turnout. People seemed really happy to be there. There were a lot of smiles on people's faces, even though it was rainy and windy. So it was good from my end. Emily?
Yeah, I was shocked at the turnout because it was pouring and not everyone had umbrellas, but there were some dedicated families there because people showed up. It was, I got a pretty good crowd, especially for the first hour. And you're exactly right. People seemed really happy. It was a lot of fun. So it was a really, good time, I think, for everyone.
The Aylesworth kids were quite waterlogged by the end, but at least it was a relatively warm weather day, and they got rewarded with a much better weather day the next day for the community center and the neighborhood trick or treating. But it seemed like good time was being had by all that we saw.
Did Dad keep the candy from Saturday as a test batch and then let them have the Sunday candy, or was that?
Well, there's been a little bit of petty larceny going on a daily basis, but the kids, I don't think the kids can count as high as their number of candy pieces yet, so they don't have a comprehension of what they're losing, what's being tithed. So.
Excellent. Excellent.
So no rest for poor Denise. Oh, sorry, Tony.
Tony?
I drove by and I thought the big trucks parked at the barriers were a great idea. I was amazed at how many kids were wandering around in the rain, and how many parents were willing to do it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely between the people that come and the businesses. I mean, this is not one where we have to like send 5 emails, only 2 or 3 to get businesses to participate. So, you know, I think we had about 20, if I remember, or so. So that was great. So Denise has moved right into winter welcome, which is December 4th from 4 to 6:30. And to the property owner's credit, we have commitment of $750 from Hart Realty and $1,000 from Oak Tree Capital. So that's allowing us to do a little bit more in terms of decorations and some other things. We're actually going to have some wreaths this year. We're able to do more of our tree display. So this is where organizations decorate a tree, and there's contests. And so we have 8 trees that we're going to purchase, and both the trees and the wreaths from the Ag Science program at U.S. Smith. So this is a fundraiser for them. So we're really happy that we're able to do that. We will have Santa, we'll have entertainment, we'll have lighting. So last year when we did the drive-through with the bags with stuff that the businesses have put in, this year what we're going to do is have a partnership table, and people pick up the bag and then go to the different businesses and pick up whatever goodies they might be, because obviously we want to get them into the businesses closer to, so they know where they are, even if they're going to be getting something on the outside. So and Ryan and we had a meeting today, and I won't go in, steal his thunder, go into it too much, but you know, we're definitely, Ryan's a great fan of you know, for the winter season, making things look great and festive. So we're working with his team on that as well.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes version is, you know, we have a beautiful, not just downtown, but a beautiful town. And, you know, we obviously already do a little bit of lighting in pockets of the downtown, but I think there seems to be some consensus that we could, you know, go a bit further, really make it an impressive display that wants to bring people into the downtown, make it a, you know, a sort of not necessarily literally warm environment, but an inviting environment. And also, I think the vision is to extend this to more municipal buildings, especially those that see people traffic or that are visible from town roads, you know, like our fire stations and our senior center, but also lighting in other pockets of town that we don't normally illuminate. So it's not, obviously, as everybody here knows, Mansfield is more than just Stores Village, you know, so looking at the new gateway signs, how we might illuminate the southern end of town and the Four Corners and Mansfield Center. And, you know, my thinking is, let's not, you know, have the perfect be the enemy of the good. We can always expand and improve in future years. We are, you know, getting a jump on this a little bit late in the game, even if, you know, a month or more, it seems like a lot of time. You know, obviously these things, they take a while to pull together, and there are supply shortages globally for just about everything. I'm sure Christmas lights is one of those things as well, or holiday lights is one of those things as well. So, so yes, and right now, you know, we're focusing on it being, you know, seasonal in nature. We were talking about, you know, how the types of lights and configurations, you know, would make it such that, you know, it wouldn't just be, you know, that sort of narrow holiday window people think about, but could extend deeper into the winter season, you know, into March Madness and all that sort of good stuff, and just kind of spruce things up through our darkest months of the year. And there seems to be pretty much universal enthusiasm for it. And looking forward to pulling this together as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Cynthia, anything else?
No, I think that's all I had.
Great. Okay. So we'll move to committee reports. Emily, do you want to give a rousing roundup of our Celebrate Mansfield Festival wrap up at Hops 44?
Yeah, we had a great committee and area head debrief last week. And I think Denise took really great notes to kind of apply to next year's Celebrate Mansfield Festival. I think overall we felt like it was a very successful Celebrate Mansfield, and that people seemed really happy, and that we had a really great diverse turnout of community and UConn students. People seemed to be really happy with the new kids zone and the craft booth area. And I think a lot of the feedback that we kind of all came up with was really kind of logistical, kind of having more support for Denise from committee and board members and possibly interns to make sure that she has support leading up to the event, and that we can kind of maybe collect more volunteer information and schedule the volunteers a little bit better leading up to the festival, because we had, we actually had an overwhelming turnout of volunteers. So how can we, kind of better manage their time and just make sure that Denise has the support that she needs. So I think we collected a lot of good feedback that we can hopefully apply as we move forward with planning the 2022 festival. And now we're just looking, I think, to add a couple members to the committee. So if anyone is interested or knows maybe some community members that might be beneficial to the Celebrate Mansfield committee, please let me know, because we have, I think, 2 spots at least to fill.
Thanks, Emily. No updates from the executive committee. Tony, any updates from finance and growth? No. Frank, governance.
Yeah, we were, I'm off mute.
Yep.
We met on October 25th, and we did have, we welcomed our newest member, Kyle, to our committee, which was good to have his perspective added to the group. And we started our around the committee wanted to do a board check-in with each of the different members, sort of their midterm, and see how things were going. And we were delighted to have Emily to join us for that. And it was good coming off of the experience of the festival and sort of reviewing your role. Thank you so much, Emily. It was very helpful to understand your leadership role in the festival, and then how, as a board and as a governance committee, we can collaborate on helping you fill like those 2 positions, and thinking about volunteers in general, and having almost like a database of volunteers that we need for these different board positions, because it very much relates to the roles that we have for our board and sort of the extended committee work that we need to do. So thank you for your participation in that. I think the group got a lot out of that. We also had an update from Sean on the strategic plan. And I see, Cynthia, you noted here that we did talk about the social get together was connected to the board meeting in December. Do you want to provide a little sort of update? You may have more updated information than what I have on that.
Sure. So, and this is a decision point too. So would love to get the board's feedback. So Kyle had the great suggestion that if we do decide to do a social after the board meeting, which I think most people who are familiar that that's what we've done the last several years, except for last year, we've had the December board meeting, which had been in the council chambers. Used to have it at the Lodowick Visitor Center. Last couple of years we had it at the Nash Zimmer. So Kyle had suggested let's try Graduate Hotel, which that's one of our partners in terms of being in the downtown. They've just opened up the eating area, which if you haven't been in there, I think looks fantastic. So I circled back with Kyle and Kara, and I went over and met with the salesperson, Susan. There is a room there that we could have the board meeting in. We could set it up for Larissa and Noor to technically, at least we think we can. We have to come up with a backup if that doesn't work, but Kathleen's working on it. Have the board meeting in the room, and then either go into another room for a social event, or go into the what they call the trophy room, kind of the bar and seating area. What I told Kyle is I feel like that second room is a little sterile. So I did speak with the food and beverage manager yesterday, Sarah Jane. She's supposed to get a proposal back to me, but basically they'd be working off their appetizer menu, which I have. It's kind of your basics. They would do hummus tray, they do cheese fries, chicken tenders, which they make themselves there. I don't know if they could do nachos she could do. So we wouldn't be charged for the room, we'd be charged for the food. And I think probably we would pay for the soda. I think that's what we've done in the past, and then people pay for if they have a cocktail or something. So I think the question is, do we want to do this, vis-a-vis, continued health questions and all of that. But I think we have a willing partner at the graduate hotels. And it's really a nice, they did a really nice job, I feel, in terms of creating a nice space there for the community and UConn. So anyway, that's my spiel, I guess, or my update. But we would need to probably make a decision fairly soon if we want to get invites out early next week. This is a benefit. So typically it's been in board members, members at a higher level, committee members, former board members. We usually get between 25 and 30 folks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it's a great idea. I believe me, I'm respectful of people's hesitancy to socialize, but we're open for business. I think we should all go enjoy a nice holiday social and do it at a nice place and a nice business that I think would benefit our partnership and and certainly all the community to support in a little bigger way. So and I think yeah, so I'm certainly supportive of it. I don't know that we need to do anything other than say let's go ahead with it, or if there needs to be a formal motion or anything relative to the location of it. But certainly we can do that if you feel we need to, and certainly anybody else that has any input.
Would we have a vaccination check at the door?
I think we probably just treat it as we would any other public space. That so if the mask mandate's still in place, then people would wear masks unless they're having food and drink. And
Jorgensen is checking vaccination cards in order to get in.
Only Jorgensen, only fine arts sponsored events.
right.
Well, and so is the Hartford Stage. I mean, I think there are
All theater, I'm saying, all theater is, but no one else is doing the mandating yet.
Interesting.
Well, didn't we, I mean, our annual meeting, we didn't mandate vaccines, and that was
No.
earlier than where we are now.
Yeah.
Okay. If you are all comfortable with just letting anybody come and ask if you are unvaccinated, please remain masked.
I have no problem with that. I mean, certainly we're inviting them to an event that we're hosting. And I think that's perfectly acceptable to say, as you're aware of the mask mandate, there is a mask mandate, but we would also ask if you are unvaccinated that you keep a mask on the entire time, type of thing. I don't think that's unfair or unreasonable. We certainly want to make sure that folks that are coming to the event are comfortable, that we're taking any and every precaution necessary.
I'm just not sure what the temperature is in the public at large about these concerns, how anxious people are. It does really seem to vary by whether or not you have small children in your household. And
So Cynthia, I mean, I would say you're fine to get back to them and let them know we'd like to book that.
Yeah, I'll do that, and I'll have Kathleen, word the invite.
Yep.
As you and Tony noted.
Yep.
We can certainly do that. I mean, it's a fairly small group that is included as it is, so and we'll see kind of how that plays out, I guess.
I would be surprised if any of the people we invite are unvaccinated. First of all, something like 99% of Mansfield residents over the age of 65 are vaccinated, and we don't have that many younger members. Present company excluded, of course.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So that it on governance, Frank?
We're good, thanks.
Okay. And then the business award working group, Steve, I don't want to ambush you, but do you mind giving us a little update on that meeting that you all held?
Yeah, we had a lively discussion that had a wide ranging number of topics, but I think what we settled on was we were recommending, I guess, a new business of the year award, and then a member spotlight award that would be done quarterly. The new business of the year.
Not award. Remember, we're dropping that new member spotlight. Don't
Right,
call
I
it
didn't
an
say award
award.
on the new member. I said.
Yeah, you
Yeah, you
did.
did. It was
Yeah,
a
you
slip.
did.
It was a slip.
I'm still learning. It's a new business of the year award and a member spotlight. And the member spotlight could be a business, or it could be just a member who supports the downtown financially or through contributing their time or efforts in helping out, that type of thing. And the new business of the year award is for a new business, preferably one in the downtown, but I don't think we ruled out other new businesses.
Well, that's great progress. Thank you for the update. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, the one thing you learned is that you're in with a group of people that they're going to let you know if you did screw something up really, really quickly. So
I was trying not to say it the second time. I really was.
No, hey, listen, you better get it right or you're going to get it wrong. Okay, great. So on to Cynthia, is there anything else that you need to touch on relative? You want to give us an update on next steps on Street Sense, or are you good on that? Did you give that in the executive? You covered all that in the executive director's report?
I did, unless anybody had any questions.
Doesn't look like it. Everybody else is getting hungry as well. Obviously, the other upcoming agenda items are just sort of small reminders. So I don't think of anything of any consequence. The correspondence and communications were, the packet was all part of your, it was all in your packet. Certainly always interesting reading as far as that's concerned. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order before? Yes, Kara.
More of a question, and actually, Prabhas, it's related to you as a student. So when we had our discussion about the budget, but we've also spoken in several different committees about how do we engage students more actively in doing things on the square. So I guess I wasn't sure how we wanted to approach. I think, Prabhas, we were hoping to sit down with you and brainstorm about, and it's not just having entertainment out there, it's in general. So whether the Oaks does more things for the residents that live in the Oaks on the square, how do we engage student groups or activities to do more on the square? But more generally, how do we engage students more actively in the downtown? So I wasn't sure collectively, how did we want to kind of start that narrative with Prabhas and maybe engage some other students as well?
Can I make a suggestion? Can we find some adult-sized toys to put out, like a giant jet set or some other kind of interactive, manipulative?
So
well,
we actually
I would say, I would want students to give us feedback whether they would.
Yes, of course.
Said adult-sized toys, but I think that's also a different question than my question. And I don't know, Cynthia, do you just want to have a separate meeting with Prabhas and we can start
Well, just to
brainstorming?
answer Tony, yeah, so we actually do have some of that stuff, Tony, that we put out at the movies, like the Jenga or whatever, I think sometimes, at least I forget, it's like, oh yeah, there was that COVID thing that we didn't do anything for like a year on the square. So sometimes when you get back into it, you're like, oh yeah, we lost a whole year. So we just didn't put anything out, but Denise is very interested in doing that, especially like starting in the spring and just like it's a random thing. So yeah, I think, a couple of us meeting with Prabhas, maybe bringing in somebody, that Katie from the Oaks that kind of does their programming, and there's Alexa, and then there's a couple of women with a names. So it might be a good idea to bring them in. I mean, they're our partner and they're really great contributors. And this just shows that we're thinking about them, to your point, Kara. So yeah, I don't know if I know everybody's busy, but I don't know if it's you and I, Kara, and Prabhas, and somebody from the Oaks. I mean, maybe Emily, some
Well,
of your students are.
I was just gonna say, actually, I just had a meeting with a student last week who wanted to know what I knew about busking on the town square and busking at UConn, because he has a new clowning routine that he wants to do, around. And I was like, yeah, they would love to do that. Like, let's set it up. And so I think connecting with the School of Fine Arts, or even E.O. Smith even more, it's always fun to see. I think even just last week I saw a woman busking out there randomly, and it was really great.
Yeah, I would say we could do it two ways. I have no problem meeting with anyone and making like a small group meeting. Another thing that I've been a part of for a few different faculty leaders at UConn is creating like a little roundtable of students, bringing them to you all, and then just doing like a 45-minute to an hour open discussion, brainstorm, asking 2 or 3 questions, like how often do you, just to get to understand the students a little bit better, like how often do you visit the downtown, what are you looking for? And then just opening the floor up with the prompt, like we want more students engaging in this area, what would you suggest? And then we'll generate a lot of student ideas, and then maybe take that one step further to maybe someone at the Oaks, or assign those responsibilities or flesh out the ideas a little bit more. But we can do it either way. I've done those little student groups before, and I think people like to have that little open discussion, generate as many different ideas as possible. I have no problem with setting that up. My only concern about the second approach is just that we're approaching kind of the end of the semester, so it might be hard to get those students in the room. So if we want to do one and then the other, we certainly can do both. I have no issue with either one, but we can discuss offline if you'll have any preferences as to which one. But I can make both happen, of course.
Yeah, I know Cynthia and I met with Joe Brady, who ultimately oversees all the student orgs. So we're trying to get some clarification on insurance requirements. And then Cynthia and I committed, to your point, we would go to some of the early spring semester. We would do presentations to some of the other groups, perhaps like student leadership, maybe fraternity, sorority life committees, to try to be a little proactive in terms of getting in front of the students. As you know, the challenge is every 4 years they turn over. So it's something where you just have to, consistently do it. But I guess I was just, I wanted to understand how we wanted to keep that narrative and what the best approach was. So we could meet separately just to do like a timeline and a strategy, and then maybe we don't do any true active anything till the spring.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss whatever.
Great. Anybody have anything else? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Emily, beat you, Tony, but Tony gets the second. I don't know. And all in favor. Fantastic. Everybody have a great night and a great weekend, and we'll talk all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.